Welcome, welcome. We are about to have a really exciting, interesting, and very important webinar tonight. A live webinar with Iris Hann. See her on the screen if your screen is set up that way. Our outgoing CEO of the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel. I'm Jay Shofet here with you as usual on these Sunday nights. We're usually every other Sunday night. But we've had a few in a row now, and we're going to have another one next week, and I believe one after that. So keep with us. There's a lot going on in Israel. These are very, very challenging times. We have very, very important issues to discuss, and we have to do all of our regular ongoing business as well. And all of that stuff is protecting nature is a 24/7 business. Thank everybody for coming. We're upwards of 80 people already, and live on Facebook as well. So welcome to that crowd. I'm coming to you live from Tel Aviv. Asaf, I forget where he lives, but Iris is coming to from her home in Haifa. And David Amichai doing back office from his home in Jerusalem. So we are triangulating the center of the country. And I want to thank everybody for joining. Please let us know where you are in the chats. Is our chat feature engaged? Is there some problem? Nobody's saying hello to us. Please do. And of course, write your questions and answers. Write your questions. Hi, somebody's here. Oh, that's David. Okay. Hi from everybody. Thank you, Hadass and Amit and everybody from Beersheba, Tucson, Berkeley, Michigan, and Brooklyn, and all kinds of places in between. Appreciate everybody being here. Thank you and hello to our supporters and our board members in North America and the UK and around the world. Very happy to see everybody. Wow, they're just coming in. Asaf, I don't know if you're seeing new to the webinar scene here from Albuquerque and Soho. Soho, that was Lisa Ching, our CFO in North America. So that's Soho, Manhattan, and that's Soho, London. And Seattle and everywhere. Guys, everybody, thank you so much. We really want to get going in just a minute. Now we're up to about 100 people. So I'm glad this webinar is picking up steam. I was worried about low attendance for such an important issue. David Amichai keeps telling me that people prefer just to see beautiful birds and beautiful nature than to talk about these issues. But we have no choice but to do so. And that's why we're going to be staggering these webinars. Next week, we're going to be having beautiful nature live from the Hula Valley, from the Eilat Bird Festival, I'm sorry, with our birders live in the field all around the country. And the week after that, on March 12th, I believe, we will have with us Tommy Zandberg, the former Minister of Environmental Protection, until this new government took over. And she will be talking to us about how she sees what's going on here in the situation with the environment. So yes, people are concerned, Asaf and Iris. So I think we're going to get going soon. What time is it here? How many minutes are we into it? 4 minutes after the hour. Welcome everybody to this webinar on Israel's judicial reforms and how they impact nature and the environment in Israel. With us is Asaf Rosenbloom. Asaf is the director of the legal department of SPNI here in Israel. He is an environmental lawyer with 16 years experience. Much of that, or all of that, in Adam Teva V'Din, our sister organization in the fight for the environment here in Israel, the Israel Union for Environmental Defense in English. A great organization, which is, like us, indispensable in Israel. As far as the environment is concerned. And, the thing about the environment is we have to turn to the courts a lot. And so that is why we are having a webinar on the judicial reforms. We've written this to our members and on social media, and we get back a lot of negative responses. And some of them just say, why don't you just stick to protecting nature and keep your hands off the judicial reform? Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, in order to protect nature, we need to turn to the courts sometimes. And that is why this sort of rule-changing attempt of a drastic, multifaceted legislation that is already going through the Knesset right now is so perilous to Israeli nature and the environment. And that's why we're fighting it so much. And we're also going to be touching on, Asaf is going to be speaking most of the webinar and presenting the webinar. And at the very end, Iris will give a summary and also talk about the what we call in Israel the Chok HaHesderim, the arrangements law. She calls it the fixing law. Maybe that's what they call it in the UK. In America, it's an appropriations bill. It's a huge document, I think 400 pages, that has a lot of little laws and regulations that have to accompany the budget. That in and of itself is very, very problematic. It's also going to be going through the Knesset soon. And that kind of shows why we need to keep the Israeli judiciary independent and able to rein in the government and government decisions when they seem unreasonable or otherwise very harmful to the environment. So anyway, thank you very much, Asaf. Great to have you with us. Looking forward to this webinar. I got a peek on it, and guys, it is a jam-filled presentation with a lot of really important information. Nothing really more important right now in Israel to protect nature. So thanks very much, Asaf.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us in this webinar. Thank you, Jay, for your kind introduction. So in the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about the environmental impacts of the judicial reforms. As Jay said, we're talking about a very heated political issue. As you probably know, we have huge protests all over the country from various sectors, the legal community, economists, people from the security forces, academia, students, everybody. Many people are involved, and the situation is very volatile. So what I'm going to talk about now, the reform, even the title, reform, is very much disputed. The proponents of the plan call it a reform, which the goal is to bring back some kind of balance between the different branches of government. They believe that the court has too much power. And the opponents refer to it as a regime coup, maybe a slippery slope into a non-liberal, flawed democracy, or maybe even a dictatorship. So for convenience sake, I'm going to use the word reform. It's by no means a political statement. So also, I'm not going to enter this erupting political volcano. There are different views. I'm just going to focus on the environmental perspective, meaning the legal infrastructure that is needed for optimal protection of the environment. So I'm going to try to explain why this reform is a huge concern for environmentalists in Israel. So let's begin. Yep. It's not working. Okay, so since the 1990s, we had a huge progress in environmental legislation in Israel and also in the courts. For example, the enactment of the Clean Air Act, promoted by different NGO, the coastal environment protection, pushed very strongly by the SPNI. We have progressive recycling laws. So today, even though things are still far from perfect, we have a system that is required to give proper consideration to environmental values in decision making. So the NGOs like the SPNI have representatives in planning committees and other institutions, and we have the ability to impact public policy. We work with regulators. Also, we can take legal action when environmental norms are violated. So facing the new reform, we feel that our past achievements and successes are now in jeopardy. And of course, there's grave concern that about our ability to act and protect the environment in the future if this reform goes through. Okay. So I'm going to talk about, give a brief overview of the framework of the unique Israeli constitutional system. This is important for you to understand the reform. Then I'm going to give a small overview about, of the main features of the proposed changes, the expected impacts of the reforms on the environment and the civil society. and then we'll think what can be done about it. Okay, so first let's talk about the Israeli judicial constitutional system. What I'm going to show you now is that the basic democratic values and structure in Israel are very vulnerable. Let's begin with a bit of history. When Israel was founded in 1948, our founding fathers and mothers, they failed to reach a consensus regarding the nature of the constitution. So they decided in the early 50s that it was called the Constituent Assembly. They decided to postpone the creation of a comprehensive constitution, which decades later we know that never came to be. They started with basic laws. They decided to make it chapters by chapters that will consist the future constitution. So they started with basic laws that dealt with the different branches of government. They had the basic law of the Knesset for the government, and the basic law regulating the judiciary, and several others. So these laws are very easy to change. Some articles, such as the one making the 4 years election period, are rigid. You need a special majority to change them, but it's relatively easy. So in the 1990s came the so-called constitutional revolution. So the Knesset enacted two basic laws, one, the freedom of occupation, and the other one dealing with the human dignity and freedom, that dealt with human rights. We do have the Declaration of Independence mentioning equality and freedom for all citizens, but it doesn't have a formal legal status in Israel. So these basic laws for the first time gave the High Court of Justice the power to strike down laws of parliament that contradict those basic laws. It's kind of similar to the Marbury versus Madison verdict in the United States. I'm not going to get into this. So this so-called revolution ignited an ongoing conflict between the political sector and the judiciary. The court actually rarely used its power to invalidate laws, but it created an enormous tension and animosity toward the court from groups who believe that the court is nothing but a biased political actor. However, it cannot be denied that when we examine the Israeli system as a whole, it's obvious that the court is the main balancing factor of the executive power. As I mentioned earlier, our system is vulnerable due to lack of strong checks and balances. Let's go over some of those characteristics that reflect this vulnerability. First, we don't have a constitution. We don't have a Bill of Rights in Israel that enshrines the basic freedoms. It might be hard to believe, but those freedoms are not explicitly protected by any law, but mainly by verdicts given by the Supreme Court along the years. The freedom of speech, the right of assembly, freedom of the press, equality, and so on, protected only by the courts. Also, we have a problem with partial separation of power, because in Israel, the government's coalition de facto controls the Knesset. So we don't have separate houses of parliament or other mechanisms commonly used in liberal democracies that prevent centralization of power. So, as I already said, the Israeli Supreme Court serves as the primary barrier against excess executive power. That is why people here are so concerned about weakening the judiciary. Sorry. Okay, so you might ask, what's the connection between the power of the government and the environment? So in our perspective, governmental unlimited power is a major threat to the environment. Israel is facing unbelievable challenges in the near future, according to estimates, our population is to be doubled until the year 2050. Even today, we are one of the most densely populated countries in the Western world. This means more pressure, more energy needed, more roads, more housing, more infrastructure, more everything. All this a big threat to biodiversity, open spaces, ecosystems, rivers, coastal and aquatic environments. So the executive branch has inherent traits or barriers which hinder its ability to promote long-term environmental policies. It has short-term perspective, it has the political interest, and this is why checks and balances on power of the government are also imperative for protecting the environment. And that is why also the existence of legal environmental norms are imperative, because they help to internalize environmental principles in actions of the government bodies. But we know from our experience that government bodies will often try to bypass the rules and environmental limitations in very sophisticated ways. That's why we need a strong and independent legal system that we can address when the rules are breached and anti-environmental decisions are made. Okay, so after this long introduction, let's talk about the reform itself. What does it actually include? So, as you see in a bold red font here, the cumulative effect is very significant. You have 9 components here listed, and when all these changes are made simultaneously, then the individual impact of every measure by itself is more severe. Also, there's a lack of transparency on the part of the government, because there was never a full formal disclosure of the plan, the reform as a whole. They reveal and promote it piece by piece, but we don't know the exact nature and detail of the full plan. Nobody knows the full picture. So these are the main changes proposed, and I will elaborate on each section in the following minutes. We have a cancellation or restriction of the reasonableness standard. I will explain later. We have a restriction of legal standing. The government will have total control over appointment of judges and legal advisors. The government will be allowed to act against legal advice. We have a de facto abolishment of legislative judicial review, meaning the courts won't be allowed to validate laws of the Knesset. The Knesset will have the power to easily override the Supreme Court. The human rights basic law will be downgraded to status of regular law. And so let's go over the key issues, and you'll be able to understand better. Okay, first is the reasonability standard. Well, we're talking about a fundamental legal tool used in administrative law, where the court supervises the administrative authorities. So this is supposed to prevent arbitrary and capricious decision-making. It compels the authorities to act reasonably. They can't make arbitrary decisions, but have to act in a rational fashion. In other words, they have to follow a calculated procedure, base their decisions on facts, consider all relevant considerations, and also give proper weight to all relevant considerations, including environmental considerations. So from the environmental standpoint, it's crucial because the decision makers often prefer to ignore environmental factors. We have been using this legal tool for decades now, and most of our greatest achievements in court were based on the reasonability standard. Not less important is the fact that authorities are internalizing their reasonability norms because they know that the courts are setting a standard, so they cannot do whatever they want. I'll give you some examples. First, the case of Apollonia. It's an area in central Israel that was heavily polluted by the military industry, toxic chemicals, serious pollution. So the government wanted to build neighborhoods, to build neighborhoods there. So the court had to determine and tell the government that they can't plan new neighborhoods if they don't have the full data about the polluted soil where people are going to live. That's one example. Another example is the Sasgon Valley story. You can see the picture in the bottom of the Sasgon Valley near Elat. So the government wanted to build an enormous hotel compound, which would have destroyed this pristine valley on the basis of a biased environmental assessment. And this was prevented by the court using the reasonability standard that compelled the authorities to build it in a less sensitive area. So, and we have many more examples. I can talk about the highway number 9, which was the court also said that it's unreasonable to ruin the Sharon Park. You can see the picture on the top. You can't ruin this park without proper assessment of alternatives. So it's clear that the cancellation or restriction of this reasonability standard is expected to have a negative effect on our ability to succeed in the courts, and it might allow authorities to make bad, unbalanced decisions that are unnecessarily harmful to the environment. Okay, now let's talk about the restrictions on legal standing. Legal standing is basically the access key to the courthouse. If you don't have legal standing, your case will not be heard. Since the 90s, our courts were very liberal, and they tend not to dismiss legal petitions without proper deliberation. And the proposed reform wishes to restrict legal access only to a person that has a direct interest in the case. During the years, we gained the court's recognition and respect, and now claims about our right to bring cases to court are rarely heard or accepted. It's especially important in environmental cases because nature doesn't have a voice. It cannot represent itself. That's why restricting legal standing might silence the environmental interest in many cases. Who is the direct victim when you plan a neighborhood on contaminated land, like the Apollonia case? No one lives there right now. The environmental NGOs are the only ones who can do it, who can go to the court in such a case. You can even think about a case where the danger to a special, I don't know, ecosystem maybe, that is somewhere out there in the desert. Normally, no one is directly affected by it. So only the NGOs or environmental activists can come to the court and try to protect it. Also, there's a big problem with the asymmetry of rights. Polluters and developers or environmental criminals are always direct parties to their own affairs. So they will never be denied access to the courts. Is it fair that the environmentalists won't get the same right of representation before the courts? I think this is a major threat to our activity in the legal arena. Okay, next on the line is the abolishment of the legislative judicial review. As I said before, the Human Dignity Basic Law restricts the state from infringing on basic human rights. Currently, the court has the power to strike down laws that contradict the basic law. This is a common practice in most liberal democracies. Now, this is a very big issue for the opponents of the reform. But from the environmental perspective, it's not the main problem, but we're definitely concerned that the parliament, the Knesset, will have the power to pass any law, even radical, unproportioned laws that violate basic environmental rights. For example, depriving us of the right of participation in planning processes. Supreme Court already warned the Knesset in this matter 20 years ago that it might infringe on basic human rights, but then we fear legislation, radical legislation that may be not possible to pass today, in today's constitutional structure, but will be possible without the court supervision. So this is very risky, and no one knows how future governments will use their elevated power. So we don't want this gap to even exist. That's why we're against this part of the plan of the reform. Another part of the reform is the politicizing of the courts. Today, the selection of judges is done by a judicial selection committee that is using a consensus-based system. As you can see in the diagram on the left, no sector can impose its views and candidates. You can see we have in the committee 4 politicians, 3 Supreme Court judges, 2 Israeli Bar Association members. So no sector has a majority here. And in order to appoint a Supreme Court judge, you need 7 votes out of 9. So you need consensus to build a consensus. And now, according to the reform, appointment of judges should be in the hands of the ruling coalition. There will be an automatic majority, as you can see on the diagram on the right. Automatic majority. So why is this concerning? There are 2 reasons. First, selecting judges based on political agendas assures that judges are not selected based on their professional merits. This is very important in environmental cases. Environmental issues are complex, involving scientific knowledge. And in our experience, we need justices that who can take on this challenge and understand the issues. This is said from experience. But more importantly, our legal actions usually involve conflict with the government. We usually put out petitions against the government, and we're challenging the government's policy. So we're certain that political judges would be much less inclined to intervene in government's decisions. For example, a district judge who wants to be elected to be in the Supreme Court one day, he will know that his promotion is dependent on the government. Why would he risk his future for the sake of saving an ecosystem that nobody cares about? He will have a clear interest in serving the will of the government. Environmentally oriented judges will not be selected. So that's why we don't want that to happen. We need an independent judiciary. Another issue is the independency of legal advisors. Today, civil service legal advisors operate under the Attorney General, and they're responsible for safeguarding the rule of law. Every government office has a legal advisor that is under the Attorney General, and the proposed reform will subject the legal gatekeepers to the will of politicians. And so this will allow politicians and authorities to get biased legal opinions. This is very dangerous because there are hundreds of administrative decisions that are made every day. In our view, we must have someone to make sure that these decisions are in accordance with the law. We're talking about environmental laws, for example. We fear that biased advisors will give distorted and wrongful interpretations to environmental legal norms, and then bad environmental decisions that today get blocked in real time by the legal gatekeepers then after the reform, get a kosher stamp. And this is a major problem. Okay, so here, I want you to see how all the points that I made connect eventually. Earlier, I mentioned that I talked about the cumulative effect of all the components of the reform that I just talked about. Here you can see in this diagram, you can see it before your eyes. So for example, let's say that the government wants to promote something that is very harmful to the environment. Theoretically, let's say they want to put up a floating mall on the priceless coral reef in Eilat, a very rare and important coral reef and sensitive. What will prevent this from happening if the reform goes through? Let's say the minister comes up with this idea at night. Then the first thing he does, he goes to his crony legal advisor, whose role is to give his legal blessing. Now we have a biased legal opinion given the kosher stamp that I talked about. So we go to the next step. Environmental activists want to take this to court, but maybe they don't have legal standing. So they're not able to take this to court, but maybe even if they do, what will be the legal basis for their claim? We already have a formal opinion from the legal advisor giving it the green light. If we don't have the reasonability standard, big are the chances that their claim will be denied by the court. And who will be presiding that court? The politically appointed judge, whose promotion is dependent on the government. And even if we made it through all those hurdles, still the government can easily override the court retrospectively. So this absurd example shows the cumulative effect of the reform and its probable outcomes. First, excessive harm to the environment and unnecessary, and also the neutralization of the environmental NGOs and activists from their legal capacities, making it very difficult to act with our legal tools that we use today. So in our view, this is a dramatic and serious danger. So now you all understand why the judicial reform holds serious dangers to the environment. So what can we do about it? What are we doing about it? First, there's an organization in Israel called Life and Environment. It's the Israeli union of all the environmental NGOs. So we in the SPNI, we drafted the Life and Environment position paper about the reform, and over 30 environmental and public health NGOs signed it. The paper was delivered to the people promoting the reform, the decision makers, the government, and in the Knesset, and of course the public. So we're also trying to work together. We established an emergency joint action and cooperation cabinet for all relevant organizations, trying to work together. We're participating in the Knesset hearings, trying to promote our views about it. Started a public campaign. We are meeting with decision makers. Just last week, me, Iris, and I went to see Knesset member Rothman, who is the chairman of the relevant Knesset committee, who actually wrote the bills of the reform and is the main figure behind it. And we shared with him our concerns. And we're gonna meet many more prominent people. So I wrote here, never despair. Basically, I think we're going to do everything that is in our power to protect the environmental interest in this quite historic moment for society in Israel. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you all for listening patiently. Now I pass the torch to Iris. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Asaf. It is so concerning and so can be even depressive. So I don't know if to continue to go more. Maybe it's enough for one evening, but I'm sad to say that this is not the only thing that we are coping now, and this is only one, a very big one, a big arena or a big issue that we are dealing with now, but it's not the only one. As Jay said in the beginning, now the government is trying to, the government already improved the budget law, and the budget, it has to go through the Knesset, through the parliament yet. But the budget law in Israel comes with a very big package, and it grows even greater from year to year. I remember it's called the fixing law or the arrangement law. It's a bunch of laws that all the wishes that the ministers know that in regular days it's difficult to improve. They put it in one law and improve it together in the same time. Now, in this arrangement law, we have a few major problems. One of them is the intent of the Ministry of Finance to take all the representative of the of the Ministry of Environment that are now the environmental advisors in the National Planning and Building Committee and in the Regional Planning and Building Committees. Now all these representatives are part of the Ministry of Environmental Protection. Now what they want to do is to privatize all this system, so all the advisors will be private advisors, but private consultants. Now this is I don't know where even to start to explain what a major problem it is. Asaf mentioned before the gatekeepers. Now the gatekeepers that's supposed to be, in our perspective, part of the government, the public keepers, now are going to be from the private sectors. They can be probably be with a conflict of interest, because one day they promote or work for initiators, and the other day they're supposed to be the gatekeepers. It's inherent conflict of interest. Now, a private consultant, the best that he can be, cannot compare all the knowledge that the Ministry of Environmental Protection has. He can be an expert in one field, in two fields. He cannot replace the whole Ministry of Environment. And this idea, which till now we didn't succeed to stop. We are very concerned that it's going to lead to a very problematic decisions in the planning and building committees, what brings us to the very great concern that we're going to need even more the courts or the judicial system will need more the courts. Now, if we're looking to the judicial systems and to the court, you heard what Asaf said, and even this window is going to be closed from us. So this is one very problematic initiative. There are a few more, like the cleaning fund a very big fund that was part of the Ministry of Environmental Protection. Another ministry, the Ministry of Interior, they wanted to be part of this fund and actually to take money from the Ministry of Environmental Protection. This morning, we know that this initiatives this idea was stopped. So it's good news. Never despair. We have a kind of, I don't know, give us a little hope for more successes, but there are a few more plans, a few more ideas, like to take the green police from the Ministry of Environmental Protection and to so it will be part of the new Ministry of National Security, to take a part, to take a kind of organ from the Ministry of Environmental Protection, to take it outside. It's like to take all the to take the teas of this Ministry of Environmental Protection and to leave this ministry much more weaker. So this is one more intent of the government. We still don't know if it's going to happen, but it's still in the background. We don't know if it's going to happen or not. We're still working on it. There are a few more ideas or things that we have in this arrangement law, like all kinds of shortcuts to promote infrastructure plans and to promote infrastructures in a much more shorter procedures, which brings us back to the fear that we'll need courts even more, and then this takes us to the legal reform. So we feel in the last 2 months that we are in a kind of colossal attack on environment, against environment, against environmental interest, and against specifically the Ministry of Environmental Protection, which in Israel, to begin with, is a weak ministry in budget, in professional people that they have. Even now, this ministry is not enough, doesn't have enough power to cope with all the challenges that we have in Israel, and we see that it's going to be even worse. So this is the situation we are coping with now. And the cumulative effect, as Asaf mentioned, is even greater than the legal reform, judicial reform, and it includes even more laws that are being promoted in these days. I want to say one more point, one more thing. Everything in Israel now, as I'm sure that you hear, and those in Israel that hear from Israel can see, is very sensitive. Everything is very sensitive, is understatement, and everything is very, I don't know what is the right word to describe it, but everything you say, every opinion you say, you are kind of go to one category. You are from the right wing or you are from the left wing, and it's very difficult to have a professional and a kind of clean conversation or clean discussion on issues like this. And what we feel that environmental interests in Israel, specifically now, they're weak all the years if we compare it to other countries, but these days they are kind of victim to a very one suggested polarized situation in Israel, and this is one of the interests that are in the bottom of everything, of all the considerations and all the discussion, public and professional discussion in Israel. And we, as an environmental NGO, non-political environmental NGO, the only way that we can succeed in this such a complicated situation is to be careful, very careful, from being defined as SPNI. You are a part of the left organization in Israel, and if we are categorized as part of this protest, or nobody's going to listen to us in the government. And it's very complicated because everybody in Israel has an opinion. The society is in a very sensitive situation. The SPNI is in a very sensitive situation. Everybody has his opinion, but we are trying to, and the environmental movement, so many opinions, and we are trying to walk between these drops, or to find this so delicate way, and so well, it's difficult to explain how difficult it is to find the way to talk and speak about these so important issues with not being categorized as part of this violent conversation that we experience now in Israel. Asaf mentioned before the very important meeting that we had last week with Simcha Rotman, which is the spirit behind this legal reform. And the first thing that we said in the meeting is to say that we are coming here not as part of the public protest against the legal reform, and there is very big and very huge public protest against this reform, as you know, and the entry ticket to this conversation, or to this meeting, and the ability to speak about these issues was to be not political, and it's very complicated these days in Israel. So this is the challenges that we face these days, and we are trying to do our best. It's not easy, but we never lose hope. We don't have this privilege, this time, and we're trying to find every way and every window and every chance that we can take to minimize, or to all these problematic initiatives and all these problematic situations that we face with. I think it's enough to open the discussion or to answer for questions.
Thank you, Iris. More than enough. Excuse me?
It's not easy, but
no, it's not easy. It's more than enough to open discussions. There's some interesting questions and comments. I just want to say, both of you, to you, Iris, and to Asaf, from this presentation, I'm very, very proud to be working for SPNI and to be fighting in all legal and public means these reforms that will be so harmful to the environment. And I'm also, frankly, more scared than I've ever been. So, and yet, that we left this last slide up because this is really the heart of it. And I would almost say that we have to start with the bottom of it. Never despair. Despair cannot be an option here. And I hear that from you, Iris, every day. And I also hear your pain that this is being painted in left-right issues, or, those kinds of issues, which are really, really, really not true. And just as an example, one of our own board members, Omri Sharon, the son of the former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, a farmer by profession, not a known leftist, spoke in Beersheba at the protests yesterday night, Motzei Shabbat, and called them disastrous for the country. So it's clearly not a left-right issue, to everybody who's saying that here and elsewhere. Look, so let's take some questions we have here. Asaf, there was a point when you were sort of implying that the courts could, change in the courts. Someone asks about, well, it's not here, about the lower courts. And I mean, there has to be, the courts can't intervene unless there's a turn to the court, correct? And does it start in lower courts? Asaf, yeah, thanks. Or does it go right up to the Supreme Court? How does that work?
I actually answered this on text, but yeah, sure.
Oh, you did. That's why I don't see it anymore. I see that. I'm sorry. Oh, sometimes I like to have them. Okay, so let's discuss it. I'm sorry, I didn't notice that. Yeah.
So yeah, of course, you need to have a case brought to the court in order for it to make a decision about it. Some cases go to the district court before, and some cases can go straight to the Supreme Court.
Okay. Yes, thank you. An anonymous attendee, I don't know if it's the same anonymous attendee, has several comments, which I guess the people can't see the Q&A. You can only see your own, I'm not sure. But yes, it's true that the environmental effects of the judicial reforms and the appropriations bill have gotten very little attention in the media. I mean, we see it and notice the little attention that it gets, but in the public discourse out there, it's not one of the main. Nature's voice is not being, or nature is not one of the interest groups whose voice is out there. And so I also hope that this webinar will get shared, and we're going to send it to a lot of people, and I have some friends I'm going to send it to. Yeah, thank you for that. And the people really said it's very clear, and wondering perhaps cynically what Minister Silman had to agree to in order to get the Interior Ministry offer back in that, from grabbing control of the fund. Are there any thoughts about that, or do we know anything about that? She concede anything?
Again,
Did Silman, in order for Silman to have won that fight about the fund with the Interior Ministry, I think it's a cynical comment, but I'm beyond. Let's just ask it. Do you know if she had to give anything in return from some other part of the environmental ministry, or I don't know? I
had a conversation with her this morning, and with her and her Mankal, CEO, Guy Summit. I don't think she gave up for something. She said, okay, I'll give up for the consultants and the representatives in the committees, and keep me this cleaning fund. Maybe I don't know, but what she said, and I can understand it, it's very difficult to fight in few frontiers at the same time, and you have to choose your battles. And what she did get, she did succeed to save the fund. It was very important for her, because it was a kind, if she would lose it, it's a kind of it's a very great defeat. She felt that it will very weaken the Ministry of Environment, so she focused on it, and she agreed with the Ministry of Finance that all this issue about the environmental representatives in the planning building committees will be agreed later. She left it for this coming week, and she asked for our help to back her from our position. So she tried to play in this multi-frontiers war that she's facing with. Now you have to remember she's a new minister, and she's not part of the Likud. She's in a very delicate situation, political situation. It's not easy. So she's trying to do her best. I feel that she fights as much as she can, but it's not easy.
Okay. She's in that delicate political situation because she switched parties, which precipitated the fall of the previous government. just to mention, so I'm not, you know, too concerned for her job. But I do know that I don't know if you told me, but many environmentalists I know said that of the 64 members of the coalition, the 64 MKs, she was probably the least bad choice for environmental minister. So there's that. She's shown some positive senses about that in the past. Are we working? It's a question about working with other environmental ministries. They're facing the same issues as governments turn to the right to some degree. And we do work with, you know, many environmental organizations abroad on professional issues. Have we touched base with any environmental NGOs abroad on these legal issues?
Not as I know.
No?
No, not as I know.
Okay.
But actually, we have a discussion the last week, and we thought that maybe we have to look what happened in Poland, in Hungary, to see what happened in other countries that faced such reforms like we are facing now. We are smiling, but it was it's a serious intent. We are serious about it.
Maybe it was more of a grimace from my point of view, but yeah, and then that is part of the public discourse. We are looking very much at Poland and Hungary and Turkey and other previous more or less democracies that became very illiberal democracies in many weird ways, but in the environment, it's also very important to look into that. Is this the attempt by now to make sure he's not convicted in the courts? I don't know. That's a personal question we're not going to get into, correct? Robin Gordon, our outgoing executive director in North America, has a great suggestion for the nomenclature issue, Asaf. We don't have to call them reforms. We could call them deforms, which is clever.
I know it will work in Hebrew, but
Yeah.
Okay, it's a problem. Deform. What is SPNI doing to build coalitions across political and religious spectrum to oppose these legal reforms?
Well, we do it all the time. We are trying to work with all the parties. We have green Knesset members from the religious parties. Not many, but we do have. We are trying to find common language with Knesset members from all the parties. And even if in this meeting that we mentioned with Simcha Rotman, we spoke about Ahavat Haaretz, the love for the country, the love for the land, which is very, very deep in the left-wing parties. So we are trying to speak with everybody, with every party, every Knesset member, in the language that they can agree with, or they can go with us.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. I want to respect the time here. There have been a lot of comments. Thank you both in the question and answers, which I see people do see, and in the chats. But one question in the chat I think is very important to answer, which is, what about the Abraham Accords and the whole plan to, you know, create a bigger oil transfer from the Gulf through the EAPC pipeline to Ashkelon? Where does that stand, and how do these reforms potentially affect that? And I know there's been a recent decision about that as well. You can mention in the next couple minutes.
Oh, how the legal reform is going to affect this, I don't know. Maybe Asaf can answer. I can only say that last week, it was last week or the week before, we had a very good, relative good decision. In the you spoke about it. You already spoke.
About the secrecy, about keeping the secrecy only to 1 more year instead of 5 more years. This whole crazy, and there's a secrecy clause there because it was originally founded by Iran and the security services back in the day when Israel and Iran were allies. And it's still secret for some reason, and so it's not transparent. So the bottom line is we don't know. We, the public, don't know. And by the way, Asaf, that was one of the most important things you said, which I mean, everybody's sort of aware of it, but we don't really think of it, that there has been no transparency about what's their whole plan. I don't even know if they know. Every couple days we wake up to a new horrendous thing of the plan. So, you know, literally from the first week of the government. So that is a huge problem in trying to fight this and everything. So yeah, and the
But the
EAPC pipeline
decision-
issue. Go on.
No, the decision was a very good one, because it's one of the only cases and very rare cases that CATSA, what's the name in
The
English?
EAPC, now it's called the
EAPC.
Europe Asia Pipeline Company.
Yes, so it's one of the very few occasions that someone said no to CATSA. They were used that they get everything they want. And now in a committee that is controlled by the coalition, by the Likud and the other Knesset members, which are not the most green one in the parliament, we went to speak to every one of them. And well, we didn't get everything that we wanted, but it was a very warming success. That Katza didn't get everything that she wanted.
Okay, well, you know, take pride in small victories in this whole onslaught. Yes. Final quick question. Another very good one. What about President Herzog and his behind the scenes negotiations? Has SPNI been invited to any of them? We hear about nonstop meetings he's having with every sector. Is he meeting with environmentalists as well?
Not as I know. Maybe he's very connected to Dov Hanin, which is promoting the climate forum. So maybe he is working behind the curtains. I don't know. Yeah, with us, he didn't meet us.
It's really been below the radar. Asaf, any final thoughts, comments?
I think there is a little room for optimism, because we see that the protests and the identity of the protesters is making a difference, because we're not talking about the radical left wing people who are protesting. We see a very wide array of sectors that join this protest. We have the leading economists, the leading legal minds in Israel and the world, and many more. So I think it makes a difference in the end. And also we see now economic problems starting to arise.
But do you see any actual slowdown in the pace of the legislation they're trying to get through?
Well,
because you say it's...
but today Rothman announced that he is willing to make some changes. Well, the things that he suggested are not really a real compromise, but you can see that they begin to understand that this cannot work this way. It can't work this way.
I hope. Halavai.
Yeah.
That
he also said to us in the meeting that the right of standing is negotiable. He understood what we said, so we have hope that they're going to narrow it. It's only intention. It's not. We don't have nothing written. It's only he mentioned it as kind of just declared about it. So we don't know exactly what is going to happen. Well, and even in the reasonableness,
reasonability standard.
Yes,
reasonability standard.
Even this is it was not discussed yet in the committee. So even in this issue, we don't know exactly what is going to be the final law. So we still have a place for hope. So I think they know that it's not going to pass this way.
But as Asaf just explained, Iris, and we're way over the hour, but there's still over 100 people with us, so I'm going to keep going. as Asaf just played, of course they could get rid of, say, the reasonable clause because they have fake legal advisors who approved it. They have a packed court system with judges that they picked. I mean, not right now, but a year from now, theoretically. They have an override clause if the whole thing gets through anyway. I mean, yeah, I think that they literally set up these 9 different things so that they can compromise on 1 or 2 of them, claim they had dialogue, and here we are. But let's not despair. Let's not despair.
We don't have we can't despair. We have to keep the despair to a
minimum.
we're gonna need it. So
we could be in here for the long haul.
yes.
So let's meet again in a few months, or if we need to in a few weeks, if there's new changes and new stuff, and when the proverbial stuff hits the fan, when the government first makes a ridiculous unconstitutional law and the court nixes it and the government votes with 64 votes to override it, then what happens? It's not going to be pretty. Yes, we will continue to provide updates on our mails, sure, with what's going on. And certainly, if there's any turning points, good or bad, and if we see any major things going on. So yes, thank you everybody from. I counted while you were on. We have at least 25 different states represented, several countries, a few places in Canada, and all over Israel, north to south. With us tonight. Thank you all very, very much for being here, and appreciate it. Thank you so much, Iris and Asaf, for really such an enlightening and organized and really well presented evening on these critical issues. So, Darabah, thank you, David, back in Jerusalem. David Amichai, thanks very much, and thanks to everybody who was here. See you next week at the same time with an amazing Lot Bird Festival live spectacular.